Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Authentic Text for ESL Instruction. My name is Jamie Harris, and I'm an Education Program Specialist here at the Maryland Department of Labor. I'm here to welcome you to Dan Pendick's presentation today. Before we jump in, because we're a couple minutes early, I would like to invite you to introduce yourself in the chat box, your name and the program where you work. And after you've done that, I'll also launch a poll. So go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat box. Hi, Linda. Hi, Arlene. Hello, Doug. Nice to see you. Hi, Pamela. All right, so I'm going to launch a poll just so we can see who's in the Zoom room. On this poll, you'll see options: program administrator, instructional specialist, ABE instructor, ESL instructor, and other. Please select what applies to you. Okay, so everyone should be able to see this. We have a mix. The highest is ESL instructor, which is appropriate. And we also have some instructional specialists, ABE instructors, and other. Well, thank you for being here. I want to turn it over now to Dan. Dan, take it away.
Hi, this is Dan. Thanks for coming to the talk. Just tell you, I'm a part-time instructor at Prince George's Community College, adult education ESL program. I teach intermediate level 3. Been a journalist for a few decades, but I've also taught writing in university, and I'm relatively new to teaching ESL in my first couple of years. So just quickly, this is a short teaching tip. It says authentic text for TESOL, but that's a vast topic. I'm really looking at something I kind of stumbled across and started to use: business cards, and maybe this will be helpful to you. But you know, it's being recorded, so we don't know who's going to watch it later. Might start with a quick look at authentic materials. You know, what are they? Why do people think they're valuable? Very briefly. And then share the teacher tip. Just as far as your role, yeah, really very open to all comments, questions. Because I am relatively new at this, coming into my 4th semester, I'm noticing a lot of people in this conference know a lot more than me, and I'm very interested to hear what you think. So I may pause a couple of times and say, well, how would you do this? Or do you see any potential problems here? I think it would be nice that everybody can benefit from that. So just a quick poll, get a sense of where everybody's at with this idea of authentic text. I want to answer the question of what statement best describes your interest in this presentation. So do we have that poll working? Looking for my host.
Nope. Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
So I see your poll on the screen. Let me see. Oh, here it is. Thank you.
Sorry.
My apologies. I didn't see it. Here we go.
I'm definitely a number 2, by the way.
Okay. A good amount of people have voted, so let me share the results here for you.
So about a quarter extensively. Not as much as I would like. I think that's probably pretty typical. I mean, there are things about authentic materials that, or texts especially, that scare people away. I'm not sure what they are. Oh, great. So we can do a little bit of education here. So I'll just kind of jump into that. This is surprisingly not such an easy question to answer. You know, what is authentic? An authentic text, authentic materials. I guess from my research, once upon a time, it was pretty easy. I mean, a standard definition you'll see, still a lot out there, although a lot of scholars wouldn't agree with it, is that authentic materials are communication made and conducted by native English speakers for other native speakers. But there's really no consensus on a definition. I hope I don't sound like I'm weaseling out, but it seems like any definition you come up with, you can find a few scholars who think it's totally inadequate or completely wrong. But in the end, I guess I just have to say that as TESOL practitioners, I think we generally think of authentic materials as text, audio, pictures, video in English, but that are not specifically crafted for the classroom use. So you see the slide here shows a few really typical ones that I think a lot of people would cite as authentic materials. We have, of course, newspaper articles, food menus, YouTube videos, audio, podcasts, news, that sort of thing, maps, recipes, and one of my favorites actually is these wonderful supermarket circulars. I've used these a lot actually to teach things like comparatives and superlatives and, you know, what's the best deal. So there's fun ways to do this. There's lots of other examples. I found food packaging, road signs, clothing labels, things like that, maybe business cards. So recorded information on the phone, songs, train and plane announcements, TV advertisements. So we have another poll here, since some people are using authentic materials. Oops, I think I've got my slides out of order a little bit. Let me skip ahead to.
Dan, are you ready for the poll?
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to skip a piece here. The survey, I'm pulling it up now. Apologize for that. So which of these authentic texts, these are texts, either, you know, written or spoken, do you use in your classroom? Just curious. It's quite a list here.
Okay, give it a couple more seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share the poll now.
Ah, right. So not surprising there. Newspaper and magazine advertisements. These are things that are really easily available, right? Ticket stubs. Yeah, there's quite a few things here I haven't actually started out using either. This is interesting. Let me get back to my slide here. I guess just to wrap up the whole, you know, 5-minute introduction to authentic materials, it's worth saying, you know, why do we do this, right? And I like to think of it as what I've heard other people say is sort of bridging the gap. You know, we have our classroom environment, which is, of course, we're using scripted, kind of contrived materials in textbooks, which are, you know, life-saving, and they're designed for specific purposes. They don't necessarily represent what students will encounter day to day. I'm sure your students, like mine, tell you that they're just bewildered by a lot of what they hear. It's too fast, it's too complicated. But authentic materials can be, I guess, they're motivating. I don't know, they're not pretend English, they're not fake English. And it seems like students feel like when they're working with them, they're getting something they can use in the real world, we hope. And for me, what led me into the business card thing is simply they're engaging, let's face it. Um, Much more interesting to look at than simulations that often seem to lack the sophisticated design of the real thing. You know, a sort of fake grocery coupon or schedule or something. It seems like when the students are looking at the real deal, like a time I used the Baltimore Orioles game schedule, you know, to talk about scheduling and event and ordinary life events rather than a kind of contrived one about an imaginary person. And then linguistically rich is another thing. I mean, they really contain a lot of diverse features of language, like grammar, usage, vocabulary, that the learners will encounter. But of course, there's another side to that. Rich and varied can be confusing, lots of new vocabulary, slang, things that are hard to understand.
And I also wanted, before you move on to your next slide, I wanted to tell you that Karen mentioned that she uses heating bills, bank statements, bus schedules, and metro maps.
Yeah, right. Maps are great. Yeah. Bills, right. Yeah. These things really tap a lot into the standard units in the textbooks, right? I mean, I'm sort of business cards can be used to plug into that chapter many of us do on finding a job, careers, and that sort of thing. So there's no end to that. These are things just used in the real world. Um, so I think I'm a little out of order here, but I'll just push on. Sorry, we're almost halfway through. So what about business cards? All right. Um, you know, I think they meet some of the criteria here for an authentic text that's useful in class. For me, what attracted me to them is, I mean, they are familiar. Students have either seen them, use them, or they will in the real world at some point. They're free, which is not a small thing. I found I could get dozens of them pretty quickly. And they plug into that workforce training too, which I like. And they're gradable. This term gradable, right? I'm going to get back to that for a minute later, but they say grade the task, not the text. So it kind of answers that concern about authentic materials being too complicated and hard for people to do. So I got into this business cards as part of a first night review and assessment. I mean, our program had asked us to suggested that in the first couple of nights of class, we kind of review and practice a little about pronouncing and grouping, parsing spoken numbers, whether they're street addresses or phone numbers, and also spelling names aloud and requests for clarification, requests for repetition, that sort of thing. And I just popped into my head that this may be a business card, may be an interesting thing to do that with. And I guess here's why. There it is. So the materials themselves, you know, you want to find some cards with the full name of the person or business, of course, mailing address, phone number, email address, legible type. I got a lot of mine from just local coffee shops where people would put their cards out. And maybe the downside of that is if you see on the right here, poor Russell, his card is not so, I don't know, so sophisticated and it's missing some important things. But I mean, my point is that, you know, business cards really have an awful lot of content in a small place. There's a lot here that you can work with, I think. So what I hit on doing here, I'll just give you my teaching tip activity and see what you think. The why, I guess I wanted to do sort of a spot assessment of the ability of the students to read and parse numerals. And it seemed to me that the cards were kind of a thing that would lend themselves to role play a little bit. So I came up with a sort of a pair activity with simple dialogue. And here's how I did it. And I'm very interested in what your reactions are, both, critiques. Oh, I might, maybe if I tried that, I might have done it this way, or any questions. So I kind of pre-teach the grouping of the numbers, the rules. It's sort of spelling them out into digits. 414, little pause. 305, not 0. 305, little pause. And then 46, very little pause. 23. And kind of, drill a little bit on how to say it. Every individual student gets a card, pair up. And then, my practice is always to sort of elicit from the class as a group their knowledge of things like, in this case, street address abbreviations, like BLVD, Boulevard, ST, Street. And once we get to the point where we've gotten that all out on the board, model the dialogue really thoroughly, and then give the students a chance to practice. So they're sort of going back and forth, and I'm listening, and coaching a little bit. But then I always try to flip the classroom in the end on a lot of these kind of activities. So I enjoy just saying, getting somebody to volunteer to read out to do their little dialogue, and then ask the class, is this correct? Is this accurate? What's the right way to do it? It just gave me a general sense of pronunciation and fluidity of speech, ability to read the cards. I saw the people who were shy, didn't want to talk, the confident students who really had it. And that just helped me. Let me just quickly finish up then. There's other ways I think to extend this and ways I want to extend it. But before I get to that, I don't want to miss the chance. So you're in the classroom, you've got your cards, you try this. Anybody have any comments on, would this work for you? Is there anything missing here? How would you go about this? Just give it a few seconds to, maybe the host can let me know if there are any comments we can share with everybody.
So I put a question in the chat box. It says, how would you use a business card with students? Currently, we don't have any responses, but we can give everyone a moment.
Yeah, and this one in particular, this sort of tip that I'm giving, could you see yourself doing this? Does this make sense? Or would you do it differently?
For teaching vocabulary is one response.
Right. Like there's, for example, the professions in there, realtor, lots of different uses there for teaching job vocabulary, I think. There's not a lot. I can move on.
Here we go. In a cover letter exercise, using the info on the card to format a letter.
Yeah.
Another one, vocabulary, teaching the WH questions, practicing numbers, addresses, etc. Role plays. Finally, a use for my large box of various business cards that I had for graphic design. Now to also discuss occupations.
I'm so relieved. One person would be glad they showed up. No, this is great because I mean, at first you think it's just a card, but again, there's a ton of information on there.
We also have a comment that says students can create their own mission vision statement for themselves like organizations do. Another comment is I also say we are lazy as Americans that we abbreviate everything so we can show this on the cards.
Well, I like that comment about here, the extending. I'm going to skip over this next one because I did develop a materials and the whole plan to do this request for clarification, in this case, repetition of the information. The students got these cards, little conversation cards, pardon me, could you say that again? And then it takes a little bit of modeling, and you see there's a simple dialogue. This is more of a phone dialogue. Hello, Marcus Robinson, how can I help you? But I want to actually, since we only have a few more minutes, that comment about mission statements. I'm actually really interested this coming semester to push this toward more realistic situations. Because that's the thing about authentic materials. You can use them in a very inauthentic way, and I think that comes across in the scholarship quite a bit. So first of all, you could think of a role play where the students learn more about the businesses and professions on their cards, do a business networking event. In this case, they're still pretending to be somebody else. But the class project, I really want to try this, where students develop their own business cards, either what they do now, what they would like to do, a business they would like to start one day. I don't know about you, a lot of my students are interested in starting their own businesses. And this could actually end up being a student networking between the actual students with their actual jobs and things during the end of semester party. So that's really where I'm headed toward with this, to try to come up with more realistic interactions, because it's fine to pretend to be other people, but when they can walk out with something like their own card and some sense of how to use them and how to hand them off to people when you speak, I think that would be really fun to try.
So Dan, we have one more minute. Did you want to share one more part of your tip in the last minute before we?
No, actually, I'm still interested if there's any other feedback and ideas. As often happens, I go to these events here online and I get a million ideas as people are talking. And it just would be nice if we could all do a little bit more sharing, because I only have so many things to say.
Sharing is a good thing. Well, thank you, Dan, for sharing your teaching tip. It looks like people have gotten a lot of ideas and they put it in the chat box. We want to thank you for participating today. You'll find a couple links in the chat box. One that's linked to the website, and the website will have all the recordings and handouts and things of that nature. Also, if you need proof of participation, there's a link. Complete that form, please. And the last link you'll see is a feedback survey. So Dan, we want to thank you so much for doing this today. Thank you everyone for participating, and have a lovely Tuesday.
Great ideas. Thank you.
Bye-bye.